All right, I think we're ready to get started. Looks like folks are still trickling in. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today for our CoC Community Meeting. I am not Jamie Jeanette. I am her proxy for today. I'm Shelby Ferguson, also with Health, Housing, and Homeless Services. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Looking forward to today's meeting. I will start sharing the screen. If you could please put your name, your pronouns, where you're from in the chat, that would be great. And then I will pass it to you, Juno, if I can get this going.
Thank you. We'll wait for this slide deck to come up and then we'll get right into it.
Bars in my way.
Perfect. So thank you everybody for being here today. This is our March 7th CoC Community Meeting. We'll get right into it. As you heard just a second ago, as people continue to trickle in, I see names continuing to pop up. Feel free to do introductions in the chat. You can put your name, your pronouns, and your agency, and we'll remind y'all one more time as we go forward as people continue to trickle in. So if I didn't already introduce myself, my name is Juno Hedrick. I am the chair on the Council of Homelessness and one of the Lived Experience advisors. I'm also a Youth Action Council member. And just so we're all on the same page about the purpose of the meeting, these meetings happen quarterly and they're open to anyone in the community, especially and foremost people with lived experience of homelessness. And allows us to come together to learn and share and to bring up ideas that we've learned in the past quarter, our input topics that we've had some experience on, that we've gained some experience on in the past quarter. And all with the purpose of, related to, but all with the purpose of improving our system of care and improving our ability to do that care. So thanks everybody for being here. I see a lot of familiar names in the chat, and we'll move on to the next slide. So this is that other reminder I was talking about for anybody who's still maybe just entered the room or is just getting settled in. We're doing introductions in the chat. Feel free to put your name and preferred pronouns and also your affiliation, whatever that may be. For many of us here, that's probably our agency, and for many others, it's probably also maybe the neighborhood or group you're from. But whatever you feel comfortable sharing in that regard, feel free to drop that in the chat. And feel free to send a little emojis to each other. I know that we see each other a lot in passing in some of these meetings. Waves are always appreciated. So yeah, feel free to say hi there. And we're gonna move to a quick poll to kind of ground us today. We've got quite a few people here, and I think it's always useful to ground us in the moment a little bit before we get into the thick of meetings and nitty gritty. So we'll start with a quick poll. If you're unable to access the poll or unable to see it, I will read the questions out and you can put your answers in the chat if you feel comfortable. Otherwise, there's no requirement to answer. These answers your name won't be tracked along with the answers or anything like that. Just a grounding activity. So the first question, and should have popped up for most of y'all, is do you have lived experience of homelessness? And I know that we did ask, this was part of the meeting registration, but this will help us see who else is in the room with us.
I launched the poll and I don't think it's working. Can anyone see the poll?
I saw the poll, but maybe...
Shelby, I see a button to end the poll, so it might... Zoom might be confused about us.
Okay, hang on.
Just one moment. If it doesn't pop up, can we reset the poll?
We can try. Let's see.
Are folks seeing the results right now, actually?
Yes, the results just popped up.
Wonderful. I think it's working.
Is it? Okay. On my end, I can't see. I just see the poll and I can't tell if anyone's participating. Great.
Think
Let's
Luckily, we did have some participation. Yeah, bear with us through the Zoom stuff. But feel like we've been at it for so long, there's always an issue. I think the results were popped up for most people. I think that yes was 54% and no was 46%.
Thanks, Joe.
Perfect.
I'll launch the next one.
Thank you. So the next question is, what best describes your race and ethnicity? You can check any and all that apply, or there's an option to put other, or I prefer not to say. And if you are giving your answers in the chat or would like to, feel free to put your race or ethnicity there, even if it's not one of the listed options, of course. Mary in the chat says that she missed the first poll. So not everybody got to see it. It looks like you weren't the only one.
If you didn't see the polls, feel free to put your answers to those poll questions on the slide in the chat. That can work too. And I'm going to go ahead and end this poll.
Perfect. There it is. The results should be shared with everybody now. Normally I would read through them all, but in the interest of time, we'll just take a peek at them just so we know who's in the room. And feel free to put your answer in the chat as well. Okay, and we'll move on to our third poll question.
Oh, Jamie didn't build that one.
Uh-oh.
It's not there. I'm going to put it in the chat though.
Okay, so this one is going to be a chat exclusive poll response. And the question is, what best describes your racial identity? Sorry, apologies, we just answered that one. The third one is going to be, do you have lived experience of homelessness? No, these are out of order a little bit. Apologies, everybody. The third question, for real this time, is what part of the county do you live, stay, or work in?
Thanks everyone for your patience.
Perfect. I see some responses starting to fill in the chat. Looks like we got a lot of people in Central, a few people from South and West. I see an East in there. Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Feel free to continue to put your answers in there. It's actually kind of nice to see them all laid out like this.
Thanks, Juno. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. We still, the activity, I think, still got to prove its use.
Thanks everybody for entertaining us. I'll move us on to the next slide. And I'm going to pass it over to Joe.
Hi, everyone. Joe Bruno here, Vice Chair, the other lived experience seat on the council. And I am here to do a little bit of my voice on the lived experience perspective and just the importance of everything. So there were some questions that were asked to me personally of the lived experience perspective of homelessness. And I ended up at this table from I was bringing that peer model of nothing about us without us to this table. And when I started, I think it's been 2 years, this is now my 3rd year in the seat as lived experience advisor. And it's pretty amazing to see how I've been doing the work for 7 years, and a little later in our presentation today, you'll be somebody will talk about the Spirit program and more peer support. But being in the position that I've been in, I really like to be at this table to hold the system accountable. There is, we can talk about things all day long, and in my education and my journey through Contra Costa County, I've learned that peer support and the lived experience perspective is needed in every single department that I've ever visited. It's an overlap there. It goes in every department, every policy that's written, there should be a lived experience perspective with, and so bringing all of this, I just, it's really wonderful to be here and talk about the importance of that. And in my journey, like I mentioned with Spirit and the Spirit program, valedictorian 2021, and I just, it's exciting. And through this process that I've been doing lived experience perspective and bringing it to the system change, and I am the founder. I'm one of the founders of Delta Peers, which is focused out of Antioch. And what's happened is, with the community input from my Spirit program and the community input from when I was homeless, just prior to COVID, I became homeless. So it's still very fresh in everything that I do with homelessness and policy change and lived experience perspective. And through this time of Delta Peers and just networking with folks, I've learned that it's not, nothing about us without us is ideal, but to put that into the perspective of policy and how our literal story is exactly what changes policy. And so Delta Peers is this, I don't know, network of peer specialists who come from the Spirit program, and we're statewide. And again, somebody should be talking about that later. But it really is just comes down to this moment of building the networks, holding the system accountable, bringing, the importance of our lived experience, and either that be with mental health, either that be with homelessness, either that be with addiction. There are so many things. And like I said, it needs to be in every department in every which way possible. So that all to say that bringing this to the table of the Council on Homelessness and being in the chair of vice chair as well as lived experience advisor, this is how authentic relationships are built. It's how you create a welcoming environment. It is we just build trust, and just, when something may happen and mistakes happen, and there's this sense of urgency around something, we still just manage to come together and take a deep breath and just appreciate where we are in all of our lived experience perspectives, and just trying to find that time to respect each other. And I tell you, it's not easy, but it's quite rewarding to be in these environments to where we can talk about this stuff. And it goes from the system to the community, or from the community to the system, and building those bridges and just tightening the network, I think is really, really essential. And with that, I'm going to bring it back over to Juno, because we talked a little bit about the differences between what it was like when we first started as opposed to where it is right now. And it's amazing to see that both chair and vice chair are also both lived experience advisors. So I just wanted to throw it back to Juno and have her share a little bit around the difference between what it used to be when we started as opposed to what it is now, and just the beauty of building those relationships and being our authentic selves, and continuing the work together. So I really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Joe Bruno, peer support specialist, Delta Peers lived experience advisor.
Thank you, Joe. And I do have a little bit of experience to share. When Joe and I started on the council, pretty much right alongside each other, and there was already a little bit of work being done on centering the voices of lived experience. But as Joe said, it's really the experiences, our experiences themselves, that bring that change into policy and into our reality. So by sharing our stories, Joe and I were able to sort of continue to push that work along and say that I'm willing even to say that some of that work couldn't have been possible without having those experiences there in the room and being focused. So I guess a really good example is that comes to mind is with compensation for people with lived experience participating in council business. And when we first started, Joe and I sort of had to navigate what it was like to be in cooperation, creating that policy. There wasn't really an outlined method or an outlined way that compensation would happen. And it was something that, because that Joe and I made it clear that this was something that we couldn't effectively share our experience without having our time compensated and our time recognized as experts in that regard. Without the compensation, it was impossible to kind of bring that voice to the table as effectively and as consistently as we've been able to. And it's a really good example, I think, that we've continued to do a lot of work since then. And there's been still continuous progress, but if we feel as if that, I feel as if, I don't want to speak directly for Joe, but I feel as if that work would not have come to fruition nearly as quickly without those lived experiences at the table. And I think that's personally why I think it's one of the reasons why I think it was very important for me as an individual, but it's also nice to see that those, and kind of was hard to recognize in the moment, that those experiences would spur actual policy change. So thank you, Joe, for passing that over to me and letting me share that. And I appreciate you and the work you do.
Ditto that. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Juno. Really appreciate hearing from you both. Should have specified in the beginning that these used to be called the learning hubs, the CoC learning hubs. We're really changing these to be called community meetings, and we want them to be focused on topics that are of interest to you all as our community. And one of them was talking how we incorporate people with lived experience in a variety of ways through them. So that's why you've heard from Joe and Juno, and you'll be hearing from quite a few people on a lot of cool projects and things that have been happening in our system and how folks with lived experience has been involved. Oh no, my internet is unstable. Yikes. With that, I'm gonna pass it over to Emily to talk about some best practices. Emily, take it away.
Hi, everyone. If you haven't had the chance to meet me and I haven't had the chance to meet you, I am the Master's in Social Welfare intern at H3. I'm currently in grad school to get my Master's in Social Welfare, and I've had the privilege of interning at H3 since September. And I just wanted to present some context. Joe and Juno put it beautifully as to the reason why we're doing this work and why we want to involve people who have lived experience in homelessness, and why that is a goal for the CoC. And this is going to be the North Star. These are going to be the best practices of how we can do this work better, how we can remove barriers, and how we can increase access to advocacy for those who have a wealth of knowledge and experience and who our services affect ultimately and should have a say in those services. So I'm going to briefly run through these best practices. And best practices is just a fancy way of saying, what does the research say? What does the experience showed us? And what does our community need? And as Joe already mentioned, nothing about us without us. And that is the headline for what we want to incorporate into our CoC services. So number one, making sure that you have the appropriate resources to support those who are wanting to be in advocacy situations, who have lived experience, making sure that you are compensating financially. People with lived experience have a wealth of knowledge and experience, and they should be compensated for that expertise and putting your money where your mouth is. Childcare, transportation support. We're responsible for addressing any environmental barriers to engaging in system advocacy. How these barriers are addressed might depend on the individual, but it is an important part for problem solving if you are looking to engage more people with lived experience into your planning, implementation, evaluation. Technology support. This means problem solving around access to internet, access to working computers, providing practical guidance, how to log into meetings, how to use shared docs, if you use shared docs, how to open documents, anything that would be related to technology support. And then resources related to language translation. This could be translation for meetings or materials that are provided, making sure that you have appropriate language translation so that that is not an access barrier for those who want to participate. Meaningful work. This revolves around your organization's intent. Centering lived experience must be prioritized because it is an individual and organizational value. If the engagement is performative or if it's to check a box, meaningful work can't happen. When you center the knowledge and needs and expertise of those who have lived experience with homelessness, only true collaboration can happen then. And it needs to have buy-in across the bar. And when you have that meaningful intent, then collaboration, you're going to see it in planning, you're going to see it in implementation, and you're going to see it in evaluation. And a little further on in this meeting, we're going to break down some activities that have happened in the CoC and in providers in our community that have involved people with lived experience in that planning, in that implementation, and in evaluation. Making sure that the environment is welcoming. This could relate to being trauma informed. That's training both people with lived experience, but also providers who work with people with lived experience on the impact and the prevalence of trauma and what occurs when you have lived experience of homelessness. This allows those who are affected by trauma to learn about their own path to healing, and staff to know how to be in true relationship with those that they are working with. Having clear expectations. When you're requesting a person to share their expertise, you have to be clear about what you're asking. How much time is it going to account for? How often? What is the compensation? How will their knowledge be used in the future? And what impact will that have in the system? It's also important to follow up after a project is completed. Best practice is to send a finished product or update those who were involved and how it was integrated into the system. Providing training. Everyone is going to come with different levels of experience, job training, and it's important to assess individually what is needed to help set them up for successful involvement. It could be training on group facilitation, storytelling, public speaking, boundaries, office etiquette, PowerPoint, anything that that person needs to set them up for success. It's an important factor in investing in the personal growth of that individual that you're in relationship with. It means that training shouldn't stop at simple preparation, but should be an ongoing collaboration between the organization and the person with lived experience, and to identify ways to invest in their personal and professional growth. And then finally, around training, it's not just for those who have lived experience. Staff and council and board members and other stakeholders should be trained and educated on how to authentically be in supportive relationship with those who are advocating. The same trainings that are offered to people with lived experience can help those in proximity be in better collaboration. Flexibility. We all know within bureaucratic systems, it can be very rigid with expectations, behavior, meeting times, productivity. It's kind of the name of the game. But when you prioritize centering people with lived experience, it's important to consider where you're able to be flexible and meet them where they are. Consider meeting times, consider venues, consider the ladder of engagement and where there might be the best opportunities for that person to engage. Language access, both actual translation of materials as referenced before, but then also those who maybe haven't been in the realm of acronyms and jargons, that can be a barrier to information. And when you're around this information so much, you can fall into that jargon very easily. And so being aware of removing those barriers and talking in normal speak as much as possible, providing information if there are acronyms that are used frequently, making sure there's access to that information. Be aware of differing reading levels, providing support to those who have low or no literacy. Use most basic language as possible. When not possible, make sure you're explaining it in a meaningful way. And then physical access to the meetings. Holding meetings in person, is your facility handicap accessible? On Zoom, are there captions available? And just taking those into consideration. And then finally, authentic engagement. Best practice is to have a larger number of participants and increase their capacity to engage a larger number of people to avoid tokenism. Tokenism is the practice of making only a symbolic effort to do a particular thing, especially by recruiting a small number of people from underrepresented groups. Everyone has a different and unique experience and background. This means that everyone's experience in homelessness is not the same. So by having one or two people with lived experience engaged in program planning, although a start, is not sufficient for the long run. Diverse perspectives. It's important to address inequitable access to program advocacy. As mentioned, everyone's experience is different. It's important to amplify voices in your community as it reflects in your actual community, making sure that that proportionality of what your community looks like, making sure that you're engaging what is representative of your community. This includes race, ethnicity, LGBTQ plus communities, disability status, age, etc. The type of homelessness experience brings an expertise that is unique. For instance, someone who has experienced homelessness on the street is going to have a different perspective than someone who has lived in their car with their children. This will be different than someone who experienced homelessness as a youth who has couch surfed, or a senior who rents a room but is in constant risk of losing their housing. And so by including diverse perspectives in larger numbers, you're more likely to engage a more diverse perspective of homelessness and how to improve services. Allowing for a variety of different opportunities, have a ladder of engagement, meaning every opportunity shouldn't be 5, 6, 7, 8 hours of engagement, but allowing different opportunities of engagement. Focus groups, surveys, volunteering, committees, the Youth Action Board. Having a variety of opportunities shows a willingness to meet people where they are and that you value their expertise in all forms. And then finally, this is an investment in relationship and not transactional. Relationships of unequal power and influence should be replaced by authentic relationships. Authentic relationships simply means that everyone is treated equally. Lived experience individuals are not token members of boards or committees and staffing, but equal partners. When we're in relationship with each other, we create a culture of caring and respect. And the next slide, Shelby. I'm not sure if we're planning on sending out the slides to anyone who is interested, but those are some links for some best practices and some resources, national and local, that just talk more on the best practices for engaging people with lived experience. And I'll turn it back to you, Shelby.
Thanks, Emily. And we will be sharing the slides, so don't worry, you'll get these direct links if you're interested in learning more about these resources and where Emily got some of this information. Any questions for Emily before we keep going? All right. Thanks so much, Emily. All right. So, like Emily said, the key questions that we're going to be asking ourselves about each of these different projects and topics that we're going to be talking about is what kind of dedicated resource did that particular project have? How was the work meaningful? How did it create a welcoming environment? And how was their authentic engagement? So those are going to be kind of those 4 categories that each person who comes on to speak about their particular project or program will be talking about. So some of the work that's been happening in our continuum of care, we have a couple different things. We're going to start with the continuum of care participant satisfaction survey. We'll be talking about the point in time count or the PIT count, and our Council on Homelessness Equity Committee. So you're going to be hearing from a couple folks. First, though, you'll be hearing from Brindy. She's going to be talking about the Continuum of Care Participant Satisfaction Survey. And Brindy, if you want me to preface that briefly and talk about kind of the background of this survey. Emily was a part of this, so was Joe and Juno and a few other people here on this call. But basically, the Continuum of Care wants to implement a Continuum of Care wide participant satisfaction survey. It's kind of a mouthful, but basically to find out people's experience of the services within our Continuum of Care and find out how we can better improve those. So that's kind of the baseline of what that project is. And I'm going to turn it over to Brindy to talk about how best practices were incorporated into that project.
Hi,
Take it away.
everybody. I'm Brandy Velasquez from the Bay Church. And the best practices used in the development of the participant survey satisfaction survey is 1, the dedicated resources. There was payment for time. Each person with lived experience that participated was compensated for their time with either a $20 gift card or hourly pay, depending on if they were on a designated seat on the council or not. Technology support, H3 staff provided a Zoom link for the group to join remotely and gave multiple ways for people to participate through Zoom meetings, one-on-one sessions, or through email. Dedicated staff, 2 H3 staff were available to us. They facilitated the sessions and communicated with us via email between sessions and were available via email if we had questions, which I'm sure they got tired of hearing from me. Meaningful work. We discussed with H3 in the first and last session how important it was to have people with lived experience developing the survey, because we are the experts on our experience and can develop a survey that best asks about our experience. While we were involved in the planning of the survey, we'll also be invited to participate in the implementation of the survey by providing training to staff on how to administer the survey and how to ask the questions. Welcoming environment. Flexible. We were all able to participate in multiple ways, either virtually through Zoom, or if we wanted to submit our feedback via email or request a one-on-one session, we could do that too. And authentic engagement, diverse perspectives. There was a group of 6 of us. We represented all different parts of Contra Costa County. Some of us were part of the Council on Homelessness or current peer support specialists, and some of us have received services from the CoC, like me. I'm a proud member of Hope Solutions. Much gratitude. I'm Shelby Ferguson's biggest fan. But so the group was diverse and gave unique perspective on what questions to include in the survey and how to ask them in a meaningful way.
Thank you, Brindy. Great job. Does anyone have any questions for Brindy on that participant satisfaction survey mouthful, that project? All right, I'm going to move along. Thank you so much, Brindy. Looking forward to talking more about that survey later. All right, so next up is O'Neill from, are you here, O'Neill? I hope you are. He's going to be talking, okay, good. You're going to be talking about the point in time count. So I'm trying not to use too many jargony words, as Emily said. So the point in time count. And O'Neill's going to be talking about the best practices that were used in the point in time count. So O'Neill, why don't you take it away?
I'm O'Neill with Safe Organized Spaces and Lifelong Medical here in Richmond. All right, so overview, Safe Organized Spaces Richmond, SOS, was asked to participate in January 2023 point in time count. SOS's mission, housed and unhoused neighbors working together on jobs, encampment services, outreach, and safe living spaces as solutions to homelessness. SOS's 28 of 32 active employees hired straight out of encampments. Contra Costa County Health, Housing, and Homelessness trained 12 SOS employees to assist with the pit count. Next slide. Dedicated resources. Community members participating in pit received $20 an hour gift certificates. SOS staff were provided in kind for pit. Multiple county staff provided overall support. County's technical support team led the community's outreach, pre-training, day of pit at launch meeting, and phone support. Meaningful work. Important to utilize unhoused leaders who have deep knowledge of encampment locations, residents, and their dynamics. Helps outreach teams, including SOS, to visit encampment locations not regularly visited. Expands outreach and services. Welcoming environment. Multiple 90-minute pre-trained options, in person and virtually. Pre-training community members, SOS staff in advance. Pre-training made it easy to meet expectations. Proactive communication allowed for flexibility, changes in teams, and assigned areas. PIT was conducted more efficiently and completed on time. Authentic engagement. Important to have diverse outreach teams best suited to impact specific environments with their talents. Outreach teams have members with lived experience. SOS has staff with current and active lived experience. 2 ways to play roles: day of pit event, surveys with details. Survey details, demographics, number in household, frequency, and experiences being homeless, and health status. Recommendations. Plan and schedule the area assignment. For example, schedule shelter counts before shelters are emptied. More people with active lived experience maximizes these available resources, such as SOS and encampment stewards. And thank you for letting me give that presentation.
Thanks, O'Neill. That was great. Does anyone else have any questions for O'Neill about the point in time count and how folks with lived experience were incorporated in the point in time count? That was a great presentation. All right, thanks, O'Neill. Okay, next up, we are going to be hearing from Kiva. She is on our council. She's a community representative, and she's going to be talking about the Equity Committee. So Kiva, take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kiva Dean. I have lived experience of homelessness, and I hold a community representative seat on the Contra Costa Council on homelessness. I'm here to talk about equity today, and I'd like to engage you just for a minute. Can you name a Michael Jackson song whose title could start an equity conversation? I'm a musician and a Michael Jackson fan, and I was going through some of his music, and I was like, gosh, all of these titles could possibly bring about a conversation. So if you have a name, if you want to put it in the chat, or anybody want to take a minute and take yourself off of mute and name a Michael Jackson song and tell us why you think that title could start an equity conversation. Nobody brave enough?
There are some good stuff in the chat. I tell you what, I'm going to call somebody out here in a second.
Yep. Black and White is one of my favorite all-time songs. I love it. I'm a rocker by heart. Bad, yes, that was on my list. Anybody want to talk about it? Okay. All right. Yes. So I just wanted to give you an idea that the idea of equity is all encompassing in our entire society. And so we have an opportunity to always be cognizant of equitable treatment. Let's move to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to give you some demographics in regards to Contra Costa County. And we can see, for instance, the Indigenous Native Americans hold only 1% of the population in Contra Costa County, but they represent 8% of the unhoused population. That is a stark disparity. One of the largest groups also is Blacks, African Americans. We hold only 9% of the population in Contra Costa County and make up 42%, which is the highest amount of unhoused people in Contra Costa County. Just hold that in mind as we talk further. Let's go to the next slide, please. Dictionary definition of equity is the quality of being fair and impartial. Equity of treatment. And so in regards to this graphic, you can see that the person who, the person that represents the community that has the most resources also has the most support in the first part of this graphic. And the person who represents the community that has the least resources, or the shortest person, also has negative support. So not only do they don't have support, but systemically those supports have been taken away. Okay. And in the third section of this graphic, you can see that when it comes to equity, the person representing the community that has sufficient resources does not need any support. And the person that represents the community that was where those resources were actually taken away needs the most support. This fourth area of liberation, I think it should look like all three of those communities out actually on the field. And that's where we are. We're talking about persons with lived experience actually on the field, making decisions, coming up with strategies, developing the programs that serve them best. Next slide, please. Our equity committee was put together just like with Joe and Juno when they came in, and I was listening very closely. And when they came in, they were able to foster and mitigate the council paying more attention to persons with lived experience, which is an awesome example of progress. And since I've been on the council for a little over a year, we've developed an equity team, an equity committee as well. And so our goal is by December 31st of this year to create accessible information, outreach, and educational materials to engage underserved and or previously unreached communities in Contra Costa County so that people experiencing or at risk of homelessness have equitable access to housing resources and housing income. So I want you to think back when we went over some of the demographics and think about the Indigenous people, for instance, and make up 8% of our unhoused population, the Black people that make up 40% of our unhoused population. And we want to make that information, the outreach, the educational materials more accessible to those communities, along with the communities that are being served. Next slide, please. So we're just finishing our first quarter. And the goal by our first quarter was to assess existing educational materials and information gaps, to identify key target populations, and identify current information channels and amplifiers. So we do have resources, written resources, and we're now talking about how we can get those resources out in regards to not just paper, but possibly through social media, different types of media, to get the information out to the communities that need it, but also to identify our target our channels and amplifiers. And what that means is those individual persons, those organizations, those agencies, those CBOs that are that can be a liaison between the unhoused population and the housing services. So we're looking to identify, we already have identified or begun identifying current information about the channels and amplifiers. And in the next quarter, we plan to do some drafting. And what that means is we're going to revise and draft educational materials that we already have and revise them, and then identify more closely and more efficiently those amplifiers and those channels for homelessness, because we'll never have an all-inclusive list. But as we engage people with lived experience, we understand that those people that we as people with lived experience have the gold, we have the gems, we have the gifts. We know who the channels are, we know who the amplifiers are. And so engaging persons with lived experience along with the rest of the community, we can more efficiently find out who the key amplifiers and channels are. In the third quarter, it's going to be our testing. So we're going to test out our new revised materials with people with lived experience, providers and amplifiers. And we can do that testing through surveys, through forums, through individual conversations, one-on-one group conversations. And then the fourth quarter of this year, we plan to refine and launch our revised materials and to assess the success of engaging those amplifiers, and then also to determine how we're going to move forward in 2024. Next. So I think that Shelby did a stellar job at talking about best practices. And so I'd like to say that this slide is going to be agency within agency. And what I mean by that is we're going to have to do these best practices, not just as an entire agency, but also those of us with lived experience are specifically asking that we do this within our community, our own agency within Contra Costa County Council on Homelessness. I recently went to the National Alliance to End Homelessness conference, and one of the biggest topics was compensation for persons with lived experience. It is extraordinarily important that we compensate at not just a $20 gift card, not just an hourly wage, but we have to make sure that when we are compensating our persons with the lived experience and staff and those people that are volunteering, we make sure that we're compensating them at a living wage so that they're able to live and they're able to be productive in the community and want to continue with the process of engagement. I wanted to talk about evaluation. We always want meaningful work. And Shelby said it so clearly. I'm sorry, not Shelby, I believe Emily said it so clearly. Meaningful work means no tokenism. So when we are engaged as people with lived experience, we don't want to just be a box checked off. We want to make sure that our voices are heard. And if our voices are not heard, I encourage every person with lived experience to continue to scream, stand at the top of that mountain and continue to scream until you are heard, because we have the gifts, we have the gems, we have the gold. We're the ones that can tell the system what is not working for us and what can work for us. And so it's really important that the system evaluates what we say, accepts what we say, and evaluates what we say on a genuine and authentic way, in a genuine and authentic way. Our environment, be patient with all of us, because people with lived experience live trauma. So people with lived experience are going to have to be trained about how to have trauma-informed engagement, right? And everybody as well. And so it's important that we're engaging with one another with grace and with understanding that we do need training. Every single one of us needs training to be trauma informed in these spaces. And we need to be flexible with one another. And under an authentic engagement, it is extraordinarily important that we understand, go back, and in your mind, we don't have to go back to it, but we need to go back into in our mind to the second slide that I showed, because 8% of the unhoused population makes only 1% of the actual population. We need Indigenous people in these spaces to give their voice. We need Black people in these spaces. Those are two of the largest groups that have disparity in the amount of population in the county and the amount of unhoused in the county. And every voice, every single voice is important, and we need to encourage that, and we need to seek people out. It is not just incumbent upon people with lived experience to come to us or fall into our laps, but it is incumbent upon us as an agency to seek those groups out for that diverse perspective. And so I'd like to end by saying that we have more work to do, the Contra Costa Council on Homelessness is already deeply engaged in our equity work, as we have a solid group of lived experience advisors and people with lived experience we draw wisdom from on a regular and continual basis. With your input, lived experience or not, with your input and participation, we are well on our way to injecting and including equity into every area and level of our services and our organization, so that we can truly end homelessness in Contra Costa County. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiva.
You're welcome.
Does anyone have any questions for Kiva? That was great. I can always count on Kiva to keep us engaged. No? Okay, we're going to keep going then. Thanks so much, Kiva. All right, so now we're going to be talking about where the work is happening. We just talked about where the work is happening in our continuum of care as a whole. Now we're going to be talking about where this work is happening within specific agencies or organizations. So we'll hear from Jamie Schechter on our homeless youth initiatives. You'll also be hearing from Juno and some other folks from H3 on the Youth Action Council, some updates on that. And then you'll also be hearing from the Resident Empowerment Program, which is part of Hope Solutions. So first, I'm going to kick it off to Jamie Schechter to talk about the homeless youth initiatives.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So with our homeless youth initiatives, I identified 3 areas of opportunity. We know that youth who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness are undercounted and underrepresented in our system of care. So this is an area of particular focus for us right now. So next slide. So first, the project that I'm really excited about that we're hopefully embarking on very soon is a youth needs assessment. According to our annual report, and I dropped the link in the chat earlier on, youth ages 18 to 24 make up 8% of individuals accessing CoC services. We know that this is probably an undercount. Youth historically in that age range do not present, walking up to adult shelters. They're not generally the folks that we're seeing sleeping in cars. They're kind of presenting differently than a lot of single adults or families might. And so our system has to adapt and learn how to better serve young people, and doing a needs assessment will be one of those first parts in helping us identify how to best do that. So this year we're working to conduct that youth needs assessment with the goal of learning what will best support young people in gaining and maintaining stable housing, so that we can not have them couch surfing or exploring all those other options that are happening right now. Next slide, thank you. And as part of that work as well, we've engaged in a community of practice, and my colleague Caroline is on the call as well. So Caroline, feel free to jump in and talk more about this as well. But this community of practice is coordinated with support from Tipping Point. They're a nonprofit based in San Francisco, and they work across the Bay Area to try and make big systems change. We are working with lots of youth serving agencies in Contra Costa County, including Hope Solutions, Rainbow Community Center, Rise Center, and sorry if I forgot any other folks, but lots of youth serving agencies in Contra Costa. H3 is serving as the anchor organization of the community in practice, and that really just means we're kind of the coordinating body. We're bringing folks together. Our goal is to create a learning community that's going to lead us to better supports and resources for youth and young adults in Contra Costa County, and so that we can learn from each other and learn from the experiences of the people who are receiving our services and how to better engage and how to better center their experiences in the work that's happening. And one of the aims also is to help our community get ready for what's called the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project. That's a big mouthful and doesn't mean very much when you're just reading the words together, right? But it is a big funding stream from HUD that I will go into more on the next slide, actually. So the YHDP is a funding stream from HUD that requires us to build a plan to address youth homelessness that is created and guided by youth who have experienced homelessness or are currently experiencing homelessness. And so the work that Juno does with the YAC and the work that so many of our partners and young people who are experiencing homelessness do in the community is going to be super, super important to really make sure that we're getting in touch and engaging authentically so that we can create a plan and strategy that would allow us to apply for YHDP. It's really an exciting opportunity because YHDP gives us more flexible, eligible activities than typical CoC funding. Our continuum of care is a great funding stream. It funds a lot of services and projects in our community, but it can be very, very rigid. It's federal funding, right? So that can be really hard to make creative solutions or to serve folks who don't enter the system in a traditional way. And so this could give us a really good opportunity to provide services and supports to young people. I also want to mention another big funding opportunity that was really created through the voice of young people, through work across the state with advocacy organizations and just speaking up for their needs through the Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Grant Program. This is funding from the state of California. Each community gets an allocation, and every community in the last round of funding had to dedicate 10% of that allocation to serve young people. This is really innovative in our state and in our community because youth are, like I said, traditionally underserved and underrepresented in systems of care. And the state has, and with our support, with everyone's support, has said young people need a clear slice of the pie. There need to be those dedicated resources in each community. And so it's really exciting that when we receive these rounds of funding, there's always a percent that is dedicated to serving young people. Some of the projects that we served with those half dollars, though, just to give you an example of how we've utilized this youth set aside, our core team, our street outreach team, we have a dedicated transition age youth team that works with young people and is especially dedicated to young folks out who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And so that's been one of the ways that we've kind of utilized that funding opportunity. And now next slide. Okay. So that was really fast, but the key questions around dedicated resources. We're talking hard money, right? That's dollars that we are dedicating to address youth homelessness. And it is staff time and staff resources that we're dedicating to improve and expand those resources. Meaningful work, we're working to build the system in which we can engage people to meaningfully create our planning, implement the plans with us, and really drive forward how we're serving youth in our county. Welcoming environment, we're really building off a lot of the expertise of our providers and the YAC and all of the work that has worked with our other groups of lived experience advisors to really set the foundation for us. To enable us to engage in authentic engagement and build relationships that aren't transactional, that are relationship focused, so that we can create a youth system and youth serving services that are sustainable, because we've seen time and again that when services are tokenized and just given kind of the checkbox treatment, they're not going to be successful. People won't want to utilize them. And so we want to make sure that our services are successful. And the best way to do that is to make sure they're informed by the people who are going to be using them. So that was quick. I speak fast. Any questions? All right, I'll move it along then.
Thanks, Jamie. All right, next up, you're going to hear from, my slides will work. Going to hear from Juno and Tamara. I'm not sure about Chelsea. Hopefully all three are able to join, about the Youth Action Council, or we've referred to it as the YAC. So Juno or Tamara, I'm going to let you take it away.
Hello, looks like you'll be hearing from me mostly today, I think. So first, before we get into the slide, I wanted to give a quick kind of view of what the YAC is. So the Youth Action Council is made up of primarily CCYCS participants and alumni and other youth community advocates with homeless experience who are dedicated to that advocacy and leadership. We all serve as a unified voice representing CCYCS youth, and we act as liaisons between clients and staff. Our goal has always been to support each other and with our experiences in CCYCS, and hopefully in more recent times reaching out to the community as well in community events that directly impact youth experiencing homelessness. And so I wanted to make it kind of clear that the touch points that YAC has with the homeless community are directly interlinked with the goals of the group. Because most of the YAC members were previously people experiencing homelessness, and a majority of the participants are CCYCS participants or have graduated. So with this in mind, the work that YAC does and the work that YAC members do not only benefits themselves and the greater community, but also usually their neighbors or their bunkmates. And I think that's really important to remember. And it's an environment that's centered around focusing on supporting each other and also leadership training in order to continue to inspire that work once one leaves YAC or once one leaves the continuum of care or graduates. So we'll go on to the next slide just to see what else we've got to say here. So there's a few of these things. I'll touch on a few of these things more than others. First off, the payment for time is always been a little bit hard to manage for the Youth Action Council. We bring us back to the start of the meeting. That work kind of started a while ago with focusing the voices of people with lived experience, and also kind of realizing that a lot of the time youth have other issues or other troubles that may prevent them from being a direct participant in our sort of broader community of continuum of care meetings, and also the barrier of entry that's there for along the lines of learning meeting etiquette or just understanding the acronym SALAD and getting into that. And so with all that being said, payment for time and compensation for time for people with lived experience is really important. And it's when YAC is able to reach out to the community and create those touch points, members are compensated for their time, which is lovely. So without being, I did mention a little bit earlier that most of the members on YAC are youth who were previously or are currently experiencing homelessness, are in the CCYCS program or have graduated. There are a few mentors or leaders or staff supports who are part of the group. And those individuals are very crucial for maintaining the sort of maintaining the group at all. It is really tough sometimes to find the time as a youth experiencing homelessness to put aside that hour to 2 hours to go away from work or from trying to reconnect with family or simply existing in the shelter environment, it's sort of hard to find that time. And one of the major things that I benefit from my time in YAC was learning that time management skill, and learning that it's okay to not always be like the best brain, but to showing up and to be there and to have that have your voice there. And so that's one major part, and the dedicated staff involved, Tamara being a very crucial member throughout the entirety of my time Youth Action Council. I'm not sure if she's here right now, but she used to tell us that's like, getting us all together is like sometimes it's like herding cats, and it's true. It's we all have our own experiences and troubles and traumas that we're all working with, and it's really important to have that sort of leadership figure, but also the glue that kind of keeps us all together. So the work that we do, we tend to focus on doing work along advocacy, advocating for maybe legislation, or advocating for community events that might affect youth. More recently, we've been able to touch, well, more recently, I say, but with the pandemic, things where it became a bit harder to continue with our touch points with the community, but we were attempting to kind of strengthen our outward connections with the community, doing more community events, and helping out, getting our face out there, in return also getting, for example, job opportunities for the youth in the Youth Action Council, or creating just that social network of peers. I'm not as in touch with the Youth Focus Pit survey, but that work is happening, I see. I don't know if anybody else is here to comment on that, but it's nice to see that work is going on in the background, even as somebody who's pretty involved. It's nice to see that it's happening. And one crucial part of the Youth Action Council that's been really, really tough, especially given the environment during COVID and with the lockdown, was maintaining membership. It's already very few youth who actively are able to participate, to give that time, and also, in addition, the pool of youth in our shelter programs are pretty small. Cali House being the main place that new YAC members would come from, and Cali House being a very small shelter, with even more decreased numbers that were during lockdown and social distancing. So a really crucial part that we always have to work on, always are focused on, it's pretty much always the primary focus, is engaging outwards and hopefully getting more youth voices onto the team. There's recently been talks of potentially allowing YAC to have a social media presence, which I personally have been trying to advocate for a while, and think that would very much help improve with membership. But it is always on our mind because of the fact that a lot of youth do choose to step away once they are sort of entrenched, and so we have their ground underneath them, are able to secure the full-time job they're looking for, or re-secure housing with their family, or receive the mental health treatment that they were looking for. A lot of youth realize that I don't have as much time now, and I can't, and it's harder to be an active participant. So there is quite a bit of it is probably one of the biggest challenges for YAC, and something that's always our primary focus. And I think that's it for me. I don't see Tamara in the room right now, but I'm sure that I think I covered at least everything, at least briefly. So
Thanks, Juno. All right. Well, thank you, Juno, for taking that on. You did great. I think that covered everything for the excuse me, for the Youth Action Council. All right, let's go to the next. Okay, and then the last one, as far as agencies, works that's being done, is the Resident Empowerment Program with Hope Solutions. You'll be hearing from William and Jocelyn. So William and Jocelyn, I will let you take it away.
Thank you. Is it possible if you can go to the next slide? Okay. So is it possible if we can share our slides?
You sure can. Let me make sure you can share your screen. Yep, go for it.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Vera. I'm the Policy Associate and Community Organizer at Hope Solutions. And I would be allowing William to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. William Goodwin. I'm a member of the Resident Empowerment Program, and I'm a housing policy consultant, all with Hope Solutions. Thank you.
I'm pretty sure you're familiar with Hope Solutions' mission, but Hope Solutions is focusing on permanent housing with supportive services and also helping vulnerable families and individuals to not only get housing, but also services.
And I will speak to our purpose statement. The REP team purpose statement is to empower affordable housing residents and community members at large to advocate for the creation and retention of affordable housing and supportive services. In developing this program, Hope Solutions really gave us the autonomy that we needed to learn and explore different possibilities and ways that we can do our work. And by doing so, we actually were able to model what culture shift looks like. That was always the purpose. And when Alex Atkinson joined Hope Solutions as the COO, he encouraged us and empowered us to develop our own purpose statement. And this is very important, especially those last few words, speaking truth to power, our truth and the community's ownership and power. Next slide, please. Camille LeBlanc, our founder, was actually an AmeriVista volunteer. And it started as a concept of embedding individuals in organizations to give them real life experience in community organizing and policy advocates. And through that relationship between Camille, AmeriVista, and Hope Solutions, the concept of REP was born. The program concept was not only new, but unique, because back then, people with lived experiences were only essentially volunteers offering their lived experience, thoughts, and voices to inform policy and community without compensation. The REP team itself was even unique. The team consisted of members representing 3 segments of the county with lived experience in housing insecurity and living in affordable housing. REP members being familiar with Hope Solutions programs helped also to build trust between the REP team and Hope Solutions. We raise and equip new leaders to help with the advocacy efforts by providing public speaking and leadership skills needed to speak truth to power. Our values and mission focus on cultivating community trust, awareness, and sustainable partnerships. Next slide, please. Who we are. Our mission was simple back then. It was to lift up the voices of those voices who were silenced in the conversation of affordable housing and change the narrative concerning who should be housed and how folks should be housed and who should be representing the interests of those being impacted by those dominant narratives. In the spectrum of community engagement, in order to achieve equity, communities must be informed, engaged, and consulted. Changing the narrative changes minds, and essentially you begin to change systems. So the REP team became the representatives of our communities. Now, as REP housing policy consultants, we are not just people with lived experience, we are also community experts with power to advance community-driven solutions and shape policy by shifting narratives, of advocating for policy changes, intentionally centering people with lived experience, sharing firsthand knowledge, and co-designing community organization strategies. Next slide, please, and back to Jocelyn.
Thank you, William. As William mentioned, it's very important how we center people with lived experience inside the organization, inside the team, and then how it is projected in the community. The first part, I'm going to be focusing on team culture, program strategy, and organization. When it comes to internal development, it's very important to settle, to bring people with lived experience and work together with work culture, racial and gender, class, diversity, equity, inclusion, include them in the program development. It is also important to work with them to strategize a plan as a team and looking forward into the future when it comes to community organizing and policy. It is also important as a program to have work plans, logic models, and program evaluation. And when it comes to program evaluation, you are allowing people with lived experience to establish goals and also start working on those skills they need to focus on, and also giving them opportunities of professional development. And then the third one it is personal development trainings, as I said, is very important to allow them to listen to them. What are the trainings that they need and what are the areas of improvement as a team? And it's sometimes it's very individual. Some people with lived experience might need other type of trainings, more advanced or more simple as teaching them how to use PowerPoint. So it's just based on the needs of each person and also as a team to helping them thrive. Something that William mentioned as a housing policy consultant is that we recently changed titles. So it's very important to recognize the titles and wage compensation, and also recognizing them and acknowledging. And then 6 is co-creating community organizing policies, policy strategies. It is very important to have their voices incorporated in the process and decision-making. And number 7, and the most important for us, is that recently William came as board member of Hope Solutions, and it's very important to bring people with lived experience inside the organization and board of directors to have voices, not just in the program, but also in the organization. And the last one is facilitating presentations and community meetings. So allowing people with lived experience to have a chance to learn public speaking and how to speak in the public and to learn different audiences and interact with the different people and learn as they go on with presentations. And the last part is when it comes to rep community influence, how the program and how people with lived experience are interacting in the community. And one of them is recently the Breakthrough Grant. The Breakthrough Grant, it is 2 years grant working with East County, specifically with Antioch. The city of Antioch, Multi-Faith Action Coalition, and Hope Solutions are working to develop EDUs, accessory dwelling units, and micro-home communities. And the rep team is working with us in the Breakthrough Grant, but it's also state policy, and also working with Contra Costa H3. And it's very important to have their voices when it comes to racial equity and housing justice. And also allow them to create networks, not only in Contra Costa, but also in different counties, for example, Alameda County, with ABHOD and other organizations. And as I said, program development and Hope Solutions board member. So having people with lived experience in the board member of the organization is very important to have different influence. I will pass it on to William.
Thank you, Jocelyn. And leadership meets opportunity. Well, in the early years, since our program was so unique, we had to build up the infrastructure of compensation through stipend, strategies for being most effective, leadership development, public speaking, understanding how state and local government works, and finally, election and voter information. All that work and leadership training and lived experience was preparing us for 2022 and the Breakthrough Grant. When Jocelyn came aboard, the REP team and Hope Solutions Executive Management worked as a team to complete the infrastructure and development of the REP program by creating an identity for the REP members, dedicating a resource for continued leadership development, compensation structure, a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiative. And I can't overemphasize how important these 4 components are. Equity, inclusion, and belonging are hard concepts to put into action. It requires a significant investment in the REP leadership development, resources, compensation, recurring stream of funding sources, and hard conversations that might feel uncomfortable, but are essential for everyone to feel heard and acknowledged. Since launching our DEI and B initiative, we have a trackable budget. And that's when you know you've been heard, when you get a reoccurring funding source, because let's name it, budgets are more documents reflecting priorities and values. And with that budget, we were able to hire 4 new reps, change our title to housing policy consultants, and have reps represented in the board of directors with Hope Solutions. Next slide, please. In this slide, you can see our project strategy for our team works under the Breakthrough Grant. The overall intention of our work is to build thriving communities and bring neighborhood stability. 2 important things. The REP team was included in the Breakthrough Grant, and the REP team is integral in the project by intentionally ensuring people with lived experience have voice in the community organizing and policy decisions making process. One of the solutions to the housing affordability is increasing the housing supply. Although our accessory dwelling unit and leveraging unused faith land for new affordable housing both will increase housing inventory, both projects have different outcomes and impacts. Microhomes on faith-owned land has an intention to be affordable, supportive, permanent housing for families and individuals, while accessible dwelling units encourage low-income homeowners to build housing, either to build wealth, generational wealth, housing family members, or expanded housing. Supportive regulatory environment for affordable housing and cost-saving innovative housing typologies. Home for low-income households are built more cost-effective and come online sooner. Okay, that didn't come out right. Affordable housing and cost-saving innovative housing homes are built more cost-effectively and come out sooner. That's why they're cost-saving. Micro-home communities on faith-owned land decrease homelessness and increases economic stability to low-income families, as well as help to build increased mental health and well-being. ADUs, the development of ADUs among low-income homeowners helps strengthen neighborhood stability, increase wealth and economic stability for low-income homeowners. ADU tenants and permit the process is easier for average homeowners to navigate. Increase community and government partnership policies that support and inform by vulnerable communities, and the impact increases housing stability, support, and gives a sense of community for individuals and families in Antioch. Next slide, and back to Jocelyn.
Thank you, William. I just want to reframe to the Breakthrough Grant that the REP program is very essential when it comes to the Breakthrough Grant, when it's helping us strategize in community organizing and policy. And without the REP team, all this work in the community of Antioch wouldn't be possible without them. So I just want to acknowledge the REP team. So how we are centering Antioch community voices in our policy development and community organizing. The first part is education and awareness. It's very important to provide access to educational resources in the community by hosting listening sessions, informational sessions at a time that people can meet, and being flexible at the times and locations. So going to their places of gather and having those listening sessions and community discussions, so the community can can come and share with us, and also creating that welcoming space with providing food, providing other resources, and just having a welcoming environment. The second is building stronger relationships. We learned that by us going to our community in Antioch and hosting listening sessions at their locations, allow us to create stronger relationships with them and a sense of trust. And us being flexible with our community is building that trust and relationship. And the last one is being intentionally when it comes to centering people with lived experience, asking them meaningful questions and meaningful contributions when it comes to how do they find housing? What are the resources they are looking on microhome communities? What are the resources they're looking when it comes to ADUs? Asking them real questions when it comes to what are the barriers when it comes to permits and ADUs, and what are the reactions of living on faith-owned land. So just asking meaningful questions and being intentional when it comes to, one, asking questions, and also giving them the process throughout, inviting it throughout the process of organizing, community organizing policy. And the last one is cultural competence and community involvement. We define cultural competence by the sense of how you welcome and how you acknowledge and recognize people's needs, and also how are you responding and adapting to them. And these are some of our findings and some of our strategies that we use in our city of Antioch. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, William. Thank you, Jocelyn. A great presentation. I'm going to take back the sharing, Jocelyn. Thank you.
Yes.
Any questions for Jocelyn or William while I'm switching screens? All right. Thank you both so much. That was fantastic. All right. So if I can get to the next slide. All right. And then the last presentation you're going to hear from today is Contra Costa Behavioral Health, the Office for Consumer Empowerment. So I'm actually going to pass it off to Jennifer, and she's going to talk a little bit about her office and the SPIRIT program. Take it away, Jennifer.
All right, so yeah, we've been here for a little while, and if you're like me, maybe you might want to take a deep breath in and exhale out, maybe stretch a little the neck, side to side, shoulders, because we have one more to go. That's me in my office, and then on to the work. So I just want to start off by saying that you all have been doing such a great job at putting this together. I've been working in the county for, 18 years as a peer provider, and have been following H3 before it became H3 for a long time. And I could say that Juno, having Juno and Joe on this group has just been a blessing. It really has taken this group to new levels. And then there's some wonderful new people that I've met. I mean, Kiva, you're new and we haven't met in person. I'm just like, dang, she's on target on that. Like, you know, and just other folks here I have met. So I'm just amazed by all of the work that you all are doing, and the thought that's going into it. It's really deep. It's definitely meaningful work. And, you know, I think what I can bring to the table, and maybe this is why I'm placed last, is because in my experience working in the county for 18 years, that also includes my lived experience. So I'm in a lived experience role myself, and it is a management role. And that actually started years ago. So I first heard about lived experience with CFS and EHSD, Employment and Human Services Department, CFS Child and Family Services, and was hired as one of the first parent partners of 3. I was the first part-timer. I didn't get the full-time position. Oh, well, came this far, but I was shooting for it. Anyhow, so when I think back, that was my first introduction to lived experience. And so how did I get that position? Well, I had that lived experience. I had navigated that system with my husband. We had, gained our children back into the home. We did the whole case plan, and then the case was closed, and then we've moved on. Well, while I was working in that role, I happened to see a flyer for a peer. Well, actually, it was for a family partner in behavioral health, Contra Costa County Behavioral Health. And I said, whoa, wait a second, there's some, lived experience positions in behavioral health. Why I thought that, it was first created in Child and Family Services, CFS. Well, I had to learn some of that history. I ended up getting hired into the behavioral health system, or behavioral health services, and learned through my journey of all these years that the lived experience was brought to our county about 30 years ago. The advocacy started over 50 years ago, alongside disability rights, alongside civil rights, alongside women's rights. And yes, the Nothing About Us Without Us was adopted by someone who had started the Office for Consumer Empowerment here in this county, who moved on to Alameda County and has since passed. And so we're carrying some of this work forward for completion, and then to add more work. So with that said, we've had lived experience on our committees for quite a few years. They've been paid, and we've been paying folks at with a $15 gift card for attending the meetings. And that still is paid at a rate of $15. So there are some occasions where we've tried to increase that. And after listening to everyone today, I think we need to put more advocacy and effort around increasing that to at least 20. I mean, I could go for the gold at 25 and maybe get 20. Maybe we'll get 25. We'll see. But I completely agree. I mean, $20 for an hour. Earlier, I mentioned something about we are subject matter experts and need to be valued as so. I mean, our county pays for consultants. Why not pay for subject matter experts also and compensate, the way that we should be doing? So that is just ongoing work. For 29 years now, Spirit's been around, and Spirit is a course that's taught in collaboration with Contra Costa College, and that also generated out of this office. Yep, so yeah, thank you, Joe. She just dropped in the Sally Zim and Campro State Movement into the chat box. That's part of this history that I'm talking about. And so this course, Spirit, is to teach someone who has the lived experience how to use that in what we call a peer provider role. And so the only people that can get into the class are people who fill out an application, submit it to my office, and we review them. We have a contracted 40 seats over at the college. We get about another 10 that come through the college. But the lived experience that we look for is lived experience navigating substance use, mental health, or housing and homeless services, being an unsheltered person with lived experience. So that's the lived experience that we look for that course. And that course has been around again for 29 years. We're on our 29th year this year. Now, it wasn't always at the college. We began our partnership with the college in 2008. So it's been at the college since 2008. Prior to that, it was called Office. So moving forward, the other wonderful thing that behavioral health figured out is, so once a person's gone through the training, so they have their lived experience, now they've gone through the training, we need to hire them. And the county opened up positions in behavioral health to hire those folks. And we found that over the years, and there's different data, that people we've reduced hospitalizations, that people may stay engaged longer in their services. Peer support itself has become an evidence-based practice. So again, peer support itself, which is used in behavioral health, substance use settings, not substance use counselors, but substance use settings as substance use peer providers. And also, I want to acknowledge all of the folks that have lived experience that provide peer support to each other in health and housing, health, housing, and homeless services. And so what I'm saying is that not only should we be looking at, advocacy and compensating folks, for their advocacy and their engagement, but also looking to hire people to go out and work with folks. I would think that most of our staffing should be people with lived experience. Now, with that said, when I say with lived experience, that the actual classification requires that a person has lived experience, not that, oh, we're going to fill you in over here because you'd be a good fit and it's good that you have lived experience. I'm really not complaining about that. I just want to say that I want to prioritize that classifications, that want to hire for the lived experience should state that in its classification. Behavioral health has 64 competitive positions that we employ in our throughout behavioral health. So that means that we have peers that are working in conservatorship, in psych emergency services. In my office for consumer empowerment, I have 9 staff that work up here. 4 of them work with Spirit or on Spirit. And then we have peer providers that are in our clinics, our mental health clinics. And we have peer providers that are in our mental health financial services and administrative positions. So they're pretty much spread throughout our system and our programs and in our First Hope programs. And then we also have peer providers that are hired in our community-based organizations and that provide, substance use and mental health services. And then we also have peers that are hired in what we call peer run centers in our community. So that would be, for example, like NAMI. Some of you have heard of NAMI, Contra Costa. That would be the peer connection centers. So those are people with lived experience, and all the way up to the executive directors, those folks have lived experience as well. So wow, I mean, what an amazing community that we have. And with that said, there was a barrier that was finally broken. For years, there was advocacy to say that peer support and peer providers should be its own provider type. So for example, we have a psychiatrist, and that's a provider type. We have a licensed clinical social worker, that's a provider type. We have registered nurses, that's a provider type. Well, guess what? We've been asking for years for peer support services and a peer provider. And when I say peer, I'm talking about lived experience here, that a peer provider be its own provider type. Well, we finally got that with the passing of Senate Bill 803. And when that happened, that was a great joy for Sally to see as an accomplishment before her passing, and also for Jay Mahler, who also, so Sally and Jay Mahler were both the creators here in our county to get the advocacy going for lived experience throughout our county. So they were like the founders here 30 years ago for all of us. And again, rooted with civil rights, women's rights, and disability rights. And I can go even deeper than that. I've learned a lot over the years, and it's pretty amazing history of how we got here. So now with the passing of that bill, that means that we're finally being recognized. We're important, we're valued, we have this skill that we're learning, and we now can become certified peer support providers. Anyone can, if you have lived experience. Now, this one specifically is asking for lived experience in substance use and mental health. We know that there's quite a few folks that we're serving that have all three experiences and more. We're not even talking about justice experiences here, right? Today are reentry services here. So we know that there's a lot of people out there that have the substance use and mental health experience. I mean, really when you go onto this website to apply for a scholarship, which if any of my staff are here, can you put that website in the box? If they're not here because they had to move on to something else, I will put it into the box myself. But it's www.
Oh.
Okay, thank you. capeercertification.org. That's the state certifying body. This is brand new. So Medi-Cal, for example, if you want to look up your therapist's background to see if there were any complaints, you would go to what's called the Board of Behavioral Sciences website, and you can look. You can even look up doctors and see if there were any complaints. So Cal Mesa is going to be our certifying body, where we're going to be held accountable as certified peer support providers. So to become a certified peer support provider, you have to be eligible and qualify for that. So I would recommend, and there's scholarships available right now, guys. So anybody who's interested, the website is here. April Loveland just put it into the chat box. And also you can give me a call and I can direct you to one of my staff that's been supporting people and navigating this website and what this means for a person. So what does it mean for you guys? Well, it opens up the door for people with lived experience for employment. And what it means for behavioral health system is that we have finally arrived to where peer support, lived experience, peer support, and being a peer provider is being recognized throughout the state of California, along with 48 other states in this country. We were like the 49th state to institute a certified peer support program. Can you believe that? So with that said, we also will have a Medi-Cal code of ethics that we'll have to adhere to and to follow. And we are also applying right now for Spirit to be a training vendor because the Cal Mesa approves who the training vendors are for the person to meet the 80 hours of training. I'm trying not to dive too deep here, guys. I'm trying to give you kind of like an over because I know there's other work that needs to get done here. So, you know, the final piece that I want to add is that throughout the state of California and all of these meetings that we had for the last couple of years, while we were trying to put this whole program together for the state and having input from all of us, there were 3 areas where we heard loud and clear from many advocates in California where we need an additional 20 hours of training, that these were specialized areas. So first a person can become certified and then they would go on to get additional 20 hours of training in 3 categories. Guess which one of them is? You guessed it, the homeless population. That is definitely one. So is the justice, and so is crisis services. That's how important this work is. And I suppose I'll just leave it there because I know there's more work to be done here today. So thank you all and for all of your work that you've been doing here in this group.
Thank you.
That's all for me.
Thank you, Jen. Really appreciate you coming on. And yeah, it was nice to have you in because we know how important the Office for Consumer Empowerment is. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Jen? It was very helpful. I learned a lot.
I do have one question. Can you thread the needle between the state certification and then bring it locally to the Contra Costa County? Like where specifically is Contra Costa County with our peer movement?
Well, I mean, what are you asking, for example, we have 94 people who are applying to become certified peer support specialists in our county. And when I say that,
Yes.
some of them are employed by the county, some of them are not employed by the county. If you go to the website and you can attest that you have lived experience, then you have a high school diploma, then you can apply for this, the scholarship to take the exam to be a certified peer support specialist. And then
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Exciting.
So it's not just for county people. Thank you, Joe. It's for anyone who has that lived experience and has a high school diploma.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. Well, I'm realizing we are very short on time, which is great because you all gave such great presentations. I thought it was really great information. So I don't think we're going to do the breakout sessions, just not quite enough time to wrangle all of you into different rooms and discuss and then come back 30 seconds later. So we're going to skip the breakout rooms. I'm sure you're very excited about that. But wanted to just open it up to this larger group if we wanted to have more discussion about any of the work that's being done, any of the presentations that you heard. If you want to ask more questions about it, you want to have discussion about it, now is the time. We have about 10 minutes and then I'll close it out. Anyone have any questions or comments they want to add about any of the stuff we talked about?
I have one more thing I wanted to add, since we're not going to do the breakout groups, that I feel is really important when we're talking about equity.
Yeah.
Equity, well, so in our committees that we've been having and work groups, we've been hearing a lot from our community that we need to do more work on hiring people that the community would like to work with. Yeah, right now, yeah. So if a person who is of a particular race and asks for a particular race, that be available in peer support work. And there's many reasons why that's important. And there is an organization that's been doing a lot of good work around why that's important. That's in our community, and that's NAMI Contra Costa. They've been pretty lit on that, and they have a group called Uplift. It's a peer support, and it's all of the folks that are hired are African American, identify that way, and also serve African American folks in the community, providing peer support to those in the community. And they also have a CalHope team that does that. And so they've also been hiring those with second languages, especially in the Mandarin and Cantonese as well, to provide peer support. So we need to follow and do, more work here in behavioral health. And so for us, we're trying to do a lot of outreach so that we can encourage people and let them know that they can do this. They can do this spirit class. They can do this peer certification, from all backgrounds. And some folks may need a little bit more encouragement and more attention and more connection in developing of relationships in order to get them, to become those peer providers and, to be involved in all the work we do.
I'd like to add, when I went to the National Alliance to End Homelessness, that was something that was uplifted the entire time. Across this nation, you will find statistics that show that particularly Black people make up 10% of the population in these different cities and make up 30 to 40% or more of the unhoused populations. And it is really incumbent upon us to understand human beings psychologically. And I am more, I'm speaking as a human being right now, I am more likely to connect with and trust someone who looks like me. And it is important in that regards to understand that we can't always, lifting up what you said, Jen, we can't always expect that community to have a PhD or a master's degree in this area, but those are the people who are going to reach our unhoused population and get them housed and in a trustworthy and connective way. And so we have to have programs such as the program that Jim was speaking of, because when we are not requiring that quote unquote formal education, but we are requiring the actual education of having lived experience and compensating at a reasonable and livable way, then we have the resources. But and also when I said earlier, yes, we need to stand up and on the top of the mountain, but this community, our community of service, needs to reach out to those people. They're not just going to fall in our laps. We have to reach out, we have to connect to them and build trust with them so that they are willing to come into our system and provide service and receive the benefit of being paid too. So it is incumbent upon us. We're the ones that have to do the work to get those people in our doors so that they can get the unhoused house. Thank you.
I agree. Yep.
Anybody else?
Shelby, I was just going to say another good starting point for that too is our youth, especially our youth coming out of foster care. You know, they have a lot to bring to the table. Mm-hmm. And they're young and, you know, I think, you know, just well-minded in some ways, and it offers them support, and then they have something to bring back to their peers. So those are some of the other areas that I would, you know, look at in some of our junior colleges, et cetera, that would be, you know, helpful. In our high schools, we need to be putting, you know, time in and diversing, you know, different areas. Excuse me, I'm battling a little cold here, but you know, those would be some of the things that I think would be, you know, be helpful. And, you know, working a little bit more with social services, you know, I was listening to Jennifer and, you know, how she was saying how her family transitioned, but, you know, meeting people where they are.
Mm-hmm. Literally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to bring up around the peer support movement, lived experience perspective, is peer respites. There's a peer respite model that tends to the crisis of insert crisis. There is a peer, like whatever mental crisis, shame, depression, whatever might be happening, there is a model within the peer respite model that needs to be introduced to the shelter model. If we turned homeless shelters into a form of peer respite, it's over and done with. You find that in the shelters that we have currently, it's hard to build community. We can't sit around and play cards. Great, we have a dog run now at the one in Concord, that's wonderful, but there's like a sense of community that's, I'm just going to leave it at that. That I think the peer respite model being introduced into our shelters, I think would be top notch on how to care for somebody who's in the crisis of homelessness.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate you bringing that up.
I have a question. I have to admit it's coming from a place of ignorance. So please forgive me if I'm not asking the right way. You know, people lived experience, this is all gaining such great traction in our systems. And so, you know, we learned recently that 39% of our staff have been homeless at one time or another. And so it got me thinking, well, like, is there a difference between sort of having been homeless as a child or even as an adult and then being a person with lived experience? You know, I know that you guys talked about criteria or thresholds, so I'm just wondering if you could speak more about that, because I'm, you know, I want to make sure that I'm conceptualizing all this and not, not tokenizing it, and also not making, I want it really to be what it is and have the integrity that it has.
I'd like to say, Alex, when I went to the National Alliance to End Homelessness Conference, one of the things that they stressed is that homelessness is not just the definition that HUD gives. You are, because HUD gives a definition that you are on the street or in a car or in some situation that does not is not set up for human habitation. But homelessness has many faces and it has effects at every area of your life. So yes, children who are homeless have that lived experience, because homelessness in itself is a traumatic experience and can change and can cause trauma. And we know that trauma actually changes your brain, right? So even if you're a child in homelessness or in the threat of homelessness, and you understand that as a child, you have lived experience, and you are in that category, in my opinion.
And I want to further this in the communications that I've had with Delta Peers members. And so a lot of like I said earlier, a lot of our Delta Peers members are Spirit graduates. They are with folks with lived experience of some kind. The conversation that we're always having is, and I think this conversation needs to start happening within the system now that we're where we're at with peer support statewide and where we are lived experience community-wide, that the lived experience perspective and peer support are two different things. So the thing around peer support, I have found that you can have lived experience and still not be a peer support specialist, but to be a peer support specialist, you have to have lived experience, right? So there is a very specific way to capture that story that Kiva was just talking about.
Right.
There is a very specific way to capture that story and to use it, to have that person use their story to change policy. Now you can do that and that's where, when you have lived experience and you're working in the system, that's great. But to do the peer support work, that's when you get into the trauma informed. That's when you get into the self-reflective things of that crisis of homelessness. Like it was my peer support help, not necessarily the lived experience, but it was that peer-to-peer help that helped me through the crisis of homelessness. So that's one of those things that I'm always trying to make that distinction there. So that's the Delta Peers community perspective there.
Thank you.
We only have 2 minutes left, so, well, now 1 minute. If anyone has any final thoughts, feel free. Otherwise, I'll stop the recording and let everyone go. But thank you. This is a really, really great meeting. I hope that you all like the new format, changing to more of a community meeting and having a different focus. So if you have any feedback on that, would love to hear that. And I don't have it, but I'm sure Jamie J will be sending you all a survey on whether you liked the material and if you had any suggestions for our next meeting. But thanks, everybody.